Hey everybody, it's Ian, also known as CF History on the internet. It's taken me a lot longer to do this video than it really should have. Which is funny considering what the video is going to be about. This is not like a normal vlog on the channel, so if you're looking for one of those, look elsewhere. But I think that you might want to stick around for this one. It is kind of important. I'm going to talk about ADHD, my medication, all this stuff, and really all that leading up to discussing a recent development that happened in that area, which is and I might as well just say now because last time I tried to do this it took forever to get away. I am off of my ADHD medication. Hopefully for good, but right now it is for the foreseeable future that I'm off this medication. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that, and if you do have any questions about any of this, please post them in the comments. Please, obviously, be friendly. I feel like telling people to be friendly is an invitation for them not to be friendly because that's how the internet works. But I don't really care. So, ADHD is stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It is a mental condition that affects, and let me see if the figure's right. According in a study that was done in November 2013, 11% of children aged 4 to 17, and it's mostly people who are children are affected by this, mostly because ADHD has very recently sort of been identified, and they're sort of discovering that it is in fact more prevalent than a lot of people realize. It is kind of a little bit of a weird one in terms of learning disabilities, which it is classified as a learning disability, in that unlike a lot of learning disabilities, it is hard to see where the problem lies at first glance. A lot of people think of ADHD as at the bare minimum of what it really is, which is a lack of focus or an inability to pay attention, or all that kind of stuff, which is great if you don't care about what ADHD actually is, which is far more important than what it looks like it is, because ADHD is very much an internal struggle. I mean, really it is. It is, and I'm not trying to be cheesy. So much of what has affected me because of ADHD is internal rather than external. Granted, the lack of focus, having trouble concentrating, all that kind of stuff is a part of it, but what is more so a part of it is what really is going on inside your brain. And to look at that, it's probably best to explain what is actually happening. So for those of you who aren't neurobiologists or whatever, or have ADHD or aren't interested in that kind of stuff, which really you should be because it's the brain. I mean, come on, who isn't interested in brains and how they work? Probably a lot of people. I don't care about you right now. It's only people who are interested in the brain that we care about talking to right now. So, the neurons in your brain fire messages at one another, just sort of jabbering away, and normally they're kind of close, so so the electrical pulses can just sort of from one to the other, pretty fine, right? So, and I think it usually only goes one way, but what do I know? I'm not a neurobiologist. A 17-year-old who's had ADHD his whole life. It is a condition where it affects a lot of odd things, and I'm going to go into detail with that. But basically, the main idea is whereas most people have these messages that fire neurons back and forth, and it's all happy and it's great. It's great for them. With ADHD, it just sort of floats off into space somewhere, back over there by the blinds, never to be seen again. So sometimes your brain just misses. It misses, and it's mostly because like the neurons are farther away. So like, and occasionally you get the message, but a lot of things don't click in weird ways. So that is the basic idea of how at least I understand ADHD. If I'm totally wrong, feel free to let me know. I'm always up for learning new things about this, but as I understand it, that is what it is. And being a curious guy, I've asked a lot of people about it, and that's basically the idea. So I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 7, which is like right when really you want to be diagnosed. Some people, it's really obvious really early on. A lot of people are, there tend to be more boys diagnosed than girls. Part of that I'm not so sure about, because obviously there is just being a young boy and being hyperactive, and that's not really, and that's like where people go that your son has ADHD, he's so hyperactive. He might just be a little kid. But I was diagnosed at a very fortunate time for me, because it is very hard to sort of adjust to having ADHD. And I've talked to somebody who was diagnosed later than I was, a friend of mine, Kate. I think I'm probably wrong, and I apologize, Kate, if I'm wrong. She said that she had a lot more difficulty, from what it sounded like, than I had with the whole medication on the business, which again we'll discuss later. I really need to have a list here of the things I want to talk about. But I was diagnosed at the age of 7, and I spent a decade, and I spent the last decade on ADHD medication, varying doses with varying different medications and different side effects and all that kind of stuff, which was a roller coaster, really. I guess probably the best place to go from here is talk about that. A lot of ADHD medication, what it does basically is it makes it harder for the messages to get lost. But it was always interesting that it was always described to me as a medication that helps me help myself, which was very important, because obviously there's a lot of parts of my personality that are somewhat a part of ADHD that I would rather keep, because rather than just sort of submit them to whatever demon eats up all of your personality when things get in the way of you acting like you normally do. So a lot of ADHD medication that I had wasn't great. We eventually found a medication for me. I don't know how. If you really want to know, I can tell you, but since it is kind of a personal thing, I do feel that's sort of my business in a detail that we don't really need to discuss. But we eventually found a medication that worked for me, and I was on it for like the past few years. I think we just figured it out at the beginning of high school. So that's where I was, and I was on I think a moderately high dosage. I don't think I was on a really high dosage. So ADHD medication is very easily an easily abused drug for people who don't have ADHD, because it just messes things up. It's just one of those drugs that messes things up. So I sort of got to the point where I felt that I wanted to get off my medication, because even though it helps me help myself, I do feel personally something of a disconnect between who I am and who I appear to be to other people. And I'm not entirely bothered by the concept that the medication will sort of dampen some things, but it was something that and especially going off to college and being on my own and being concerned about paying for medication, I wanted to at least try to reduce my dosage. And after reducing my dosage a little bit, I felt good enough about it that we continued to reduce my dosage until today. I woke up this morning on Wednesday, April 8th, and took the last pill of my medication that I will hopefully take in the foreseeable future, which I'm very happy about. Don't get me wrong, I'm very happy about it, but that does mean that opens me up to a lot of the things that the medication has been suppressing for the past decade in me. And I guess this is the part of the show where we talk about what ADHD does to you besides simple, visible things. So, obviously, to clear the elephant in the room, there is the lack of focus, and it is not a lack of focus as much as it is an inability to focus. This is something that I kind of had that really I struggle with. I know definitely this is, of all the things, I struggle with this the most of all things, and it is a burning hatred that I have for this part of who I am. The idea, what I'm really trying to explain is that it's not so much that I didn't focus, it is that my brain would not let me focus. That there is because of the sort of the transition being weird, like having a hard time, the signals having a hard time getting around. It is very hard for me, at the very least, and I don't want to speak for other people with ADHD because there's so many different things about it that may be different for different people. Other people have found success with, other people haven't. That I don't want to sort of generalize. But for me, at least, it was so hard to make the transition from thinking, like, for example, hey, I should eat some fruit for breakfast this morning. I should try and eat healthier. To going to the freaking fridge, pulling out a banana from like the multitude of bananas we have. Like, the only thing stopping me was myself. But I just couldn't do it because of the problem that I have having ADHD with marrying the thought to the action. So it is a very difficult thing to deal with. I'm still having difficulty dealing with. It took a lot of effort to actually get this all working, but the main drive was the fact that I wanted to explain this and talk about this. So the other big problem that I wanted to discuss, the big problem that people see a lot of is impulse control. That is a big one that obviously, like a lot of other teenagers are very susceptible to getting addicted to substances and whatnot. And I haven't looked at the statistics, but I would imagine that ADHD only exacerbates that in people, because forming bad habits and keeping bad habits, and just habit forming in general, is very easy to do with ADHD, because the brain just simply works more in the short term, with the simple gratification and the simple thing that keeps the brain active all the time. That's really a big part of it, is that the brain is always active and doing things, and controlling your impulses is very hard. I know that I personally I've said it to a couple of people. I've committed every social faux pas known to man by the age of 12. And that's probably more accurate than I really wish was true. It's difficult. It is absolutely difficult. It is absolutely something that is very hard to deal with. That I might not know what I'm doing, and you get really caught up in the moment. So those are the two big ones that people see. There's a lot of ADHD famously has a lot of comorbidities. Comorbidities are things like other conditions that come along with ADHD, because ADHD is at its core a giant screwing up of your brain. So there's a lot of other things like that. I personally do not have any of the comorbidities that come with it, but I do know people who have ADHD and, say, depression, ADHD, like Asperger's, and then there's the Percy Jackson ADHD and dyslexia combo that makes you think maybe, just maybe, I might be a demigod. Which I never wanted, because both my parents are fantastic. So that's also something that does not personally affect me, but I felt it necessary to bring up. So alright, so we understand we've got, my sad little story, my just ridiculous little story about my own problems, what ADHD is, how it affects you negatively, a little bit of the comorbidity stuff. I wanted to also talk a little bit about the positives of ADHD, and it's such a weird thing that it's called a learning disability, but it does have a lot of positives. And from what I've heard, other learning disabilities have similar situations where there's like some positives, some, you might call them silver linings, to the cloud of suckiness that is, people not being able to deal with the way you just like not willing to understand the way your brain works, or in your brain just doing things differently. So a lot of very famous people and very intelligent people have ADHD. It does have a lot of problems with it. Oh, someone's coming. Hello. I'm still doing the thing. Hi, it's my mother. We're talking about the positives of ADHD right now.
Oh, you get a lot of stuff done.
Yeah. Not necessarily all the right stuff, but
a lot.
A lot. Yeah.
You want to feel like you actually accomplished something.
Yeah.
Also, if you look at very successful people.
Yeah, I was actually just saying that a lot of very successful people have ADHD. Which is, and that's the thing, is like, in school, ADHD is hell in school. But in real life, when you're only focusing on one thing that you do day to day, you can hyperfocus. That's the thing I forgot to mention, hyperfocusing. I'll talk about that.
I think if you look at CEOs or owners of businesses, the vast majority of them are ADHD, or they hire people who are ADHD to run their business.
Word from my mother. Thanks, Mom. Love you. So, there we go. Yeah, ADHD does we can talk about hyperfocusing in a second, but that's actually a good segue. I'm just gonna go with that. Hyperfocusing is sort of ironic, really. Almost a little cruel, but I don't think so. If you look at it from a very negative perspective, it's a little cruel, but I'm a very positive guy about this. Hyperfocusing is sort of similar to a lack of focus, and it sort of almost can be misinterpreted as a lack of focus in school. It's when you can fixate on something, and that can be the only thing occupying your mind for an insane stretch of time. Like, for example, I once got some baseball cards from my uncle. He's not dead. He just gave me baseball cards, and I could sit there and sort baseball cards for hours and hours and hours and hours, and it would be the only thing I would care about. And I could just do it. Hyperfocusing is a very interesting phenomenon that I'm very glad is something that I can do, because it allows me to, get a lot of stuff done. Like I was saying, get a lot of stuff done in a very short space of time, very effectively, which is sort of balanced with the periods of not being able to get anything done and just sort of sitting there staring off into space, paralyzed with being overwhelmed with all the information that is being flooded into your brain. So that's hyperfocusing, which is absolutely a benefit. But again, like in school, if you're just sitting there fixating on like drawing on a desk, or like picking up, like when I was in elementary school, I would pick up pencil leads off the floor and like deposit the box, because I don't even know what I was going to do with it, but something in my brain went, graphite is valuable. I'm going to find all the pencil leads on the floor. I found staples too. And I would just do that around the room. I don't know when I had the time to do that. I guess they just sort of let you just do whatever in elementary school. I can't remember. But that's something that I would do. Then we have the passion thing. This is something that I would not trade anything for. Is the ability of a lot of ADHD people to care a lot about things and be emphatic. This is not to say that people don't care, that people who don't have ADHD don't care about things. It's ridiculous. But with ADHD, I found that people with ADHD are so, and I've met a couple besides me, are so passionate about things that they love, or care so much about the things going on, not necessarily even just likes and dislikes, but just in general, people with ADHD tend to be, I found that they are more animated and passionate about the world around them. Perhaps because because with ADHD you tend to like just sort of drink up all the information that surrounds you. So, and that is something I would not trade anything for. I could not imagine living my life without being passionate about the things that I love, and and being passionate in general. It's something that it's one of those things that I feel is enough a part of my life that I do not feel any shame in claiming is a quality of mine, and that is a very powerful tool, really, is the ability to be passionate and have a intense, almost insane drive to do things, and to just be involved in stuff. So that's cool. But beyond that, there's just a couple other interesting things that might be interesting to mention. For example, things like coffee that like normally hype people up actually will calm me down, which is very interesting. I actually did not like coffee for a while, and then I tried coffee, and it actually helped calm down. And it's actually a very effective study aid when like I'm pulling an all-nighter and I need the coffee to focus me. Which is weird that it has the same general effect, is that it focuses me, it brings me down where it brings other people up, which is interesting. Now, granted, I will warn you that some people self-medicate for ADHD with coffee. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that, because coffee also has some other problems like increased heart rate, which I found a couple times has been a little disturbing, is to have my heart thumping in my chest while I'm just sort of walking like freaking on a level, like a floor, like across the freaking room, like my bed, and my heart is pounding. So that is, but nevertheless, coffee, interestingly enough, calms me down where it hypes other people up. But yeah, beyond that, there's not really a whole lot to say about what ADHD does to affect me. And what I do want to say is that the perception that I had of ADHD over the years changed. Originally, it was a situation where I thought that ADHD was an excuse that I wasn't allowed to use for things that and that came from a lot of different things, but basically for the longest time ADHD was something that was an excuse that I was afraid to talk about with people, because I felt that they would ridicule me for giving them a reason for things. But eventually I came to the realization, I wish I'd come to it earlier, that ADHD is not in fact an excuse. It is a valid and important reason for why my brain does not work that way. Especially with the focus thing, the inability of my brain to focus on things, just drove me insane. It actually really was like very troubling to me as a kid that I couldn't really talk, that I felt I couldn't talk about this to anybody. But it is important to talk about this kind of thing. And that leads us to, I guess, my final subject, because good God, I've been talking for like 20 minutes. It's like 11:21 at night. Is activism. I have sort of come to the realization through this whole process that I want to spend the rest of my life advocating for a greater understanding of what ADHD is. Just by watching this video, I hope you've learned a little bit about what goes on inside this whacked up head of mine, and well, I understand that it's like a common joke, so he has ADHD. It always makes me feel uncomfortable to hear people joke about ADHD, not because I'm offended by it, but because it's such a important part of my life that people joking about, having problems focusing or whatever with ADHD just makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, and it brings me back to the times when I thought about it as an excuse. And there's, to be perfectly frank, a lot of people are probably misdiagnosed. But if I could do anything with the rest of my life, barring whatever I want to do with my own personal career choices, but I want to make sure that people understand what ADHD is, what ADHD is not, and quite frankly, other learning disabilities like ADD, things like Asperger's and the learning and autism and dyslexia and stuff, because they are learning disabilities. They are a special case of, they're a different kind of disability. Like with someone in like a wheelchair, then that's something you can identify and you can understand what that means for them, because you have use of your legs and they don't. But with things like learning disabilities, since it's all going on inside here, there's so much that you can only learn by talking with someone or discussing with them or talking with an expert, that a lot of people just don't learn about it, and I just really, I feel it's very important to understand what goes into ADHD and what people need to understand to help people with ADHD and make them and help them live their lives a lot more effectively than I lived the past 10 years. Like I really do regret sometimes that I didn't understand what ADHD meant. I understood what it did, but I didn't understand what it meant in terms of how my brain worked. And that's something I want to change. So there's a lot of groups out there. I'm sure I'm gonna start shopping for a group. There's one in the area that if any of you are at Westfield, the NISI group, they have a little bit of a thing about ADHD, and one of our students, I can't remember her name, and I'm really sorry, but I can't remember her name, but she suffered depression, and she came up and talked. They're, from what I can tell, they're great and they deserve a lot of support. But I'm gonna start looking for somebody that I can help use to sort of spread this message about ADHD, and what it really means. So I guess that's all I really had to say. I appreciate you listening to me for just drone on for so long. Oh my good God. You listened to me for like 30 minutes at the very least. I'm gonna try and clean this up. Hopefully, it's gonna take a little bit of work to do this, but hopefully I should be able to get it out before midnight so you can all enjoy it tomorrow. In the meantime, I am Ian Christopher Francis Staten. I have ADHD, and you're just gonna have to deal with that. Good night.
Chicka chicka. Smashing.